next home. This is the perfect room if you're looking to expand the family. It's perfect. There's a kid's room or a playroom.
Did you say playroom?
Yeah, playroom.
I've been very bad.
You know what, let me give you a moment. I'm gonna feed the pancake.
Yeah, you go feed
Okay.
the...
Good evening and welcome to episode 61 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zama Kumalo. It's the Tuesday edition of the show. And of course, we have a jam-packed lineup this evening where we'll be exploring different things that come to property. And the thing that we're talking about, of course, this evening is certainly important if you're a property entrepreneur or an aspiring property entrepreneur. I'm sure many property investors who've been watching the show know how important it is to run your property like a business. It's certainly something that we emphasize time and time again. And to help us better understand some of the tips that we essentially need to make sure that that property business is in fact a success, especially when you're looking at commercial property, we'll be joined this evening by Mahlatse Kekana, who's a junior portfolio manager at TUHF. And we'll be exploring, firstly what TUHF is. I know a lot of you have heard me, mention it and certainly say that they're, one of the institutions that you could potentially go to for funding. We'll look a little bit about what they are, the work that they do, how they go about funding their entrepreneurs, but also some of the success stories or some of the traits that they've seen in some of their more successful entrepreneurs. But before we get started with this evening's conversation, we are, of course, running our competition where we're asking you to tell us all about your city. We want to know why you love your city, some of your favorite hangout spots, whether it's your city, your town, your village. We want to hear all about it. You're also able to send us your pictures when you're telling us all about your city and what stands out for you about it. And all you need to do to enter that competition is, of course, follow the link right here below. We've posted it, and you can follow the prompts and share with us what you love so much about the city. And you stand a chance of walking away with 2 1,000 Rand cash prizes, and we'll be announcing those winners next week, Friday. So all the best to everybody who will be sharing their stories about what they love about their city. Now for this evening's conversations, we're certainly looking at what to do when you're the boss. Tips for commercial real estate entrepreneurial success. Mahlatse, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks so much, Zama, for having me.
So I think, the first probably place that we should, start at is what TUHF is. We've certainly, I've mentioned it on different episodes right here in the Private Property Podcast. We've actually interviewed one of your entrepreneurs, Ntombi Stole, in one of our earlier episodes, who's done exceptionally well. She's got a block of flats in Bloemfontein, and shared her journey with TUHF, and has been singing your praises, certainly when she was on the episode with us. So to our viewers at home, if you missed that episode, do catch it. It certainly gives great tips from somebody who is a property entrepreneur themselves, and how they went from buying, an apartment to ending up buying an actual block of flats. So Mahlatse, what exactly is TUHF for viewers at home who are unfamiliar with the work that TUHF does?
Okay, thank you. TUHF is a commercial property financier. We finance small to medium enterprises or individuals to purchase, refurb, and convert properties in the inner city. We have a footprint that spans across the country, and we are based in all the major metros across the country. Our head office is in Johannesburg, which is where the company started and which is where I'm based.
And perhaps tell us a little bit about, you're saying that you certainly finance, small companies, but also entrepreneurs. What exactly is the criteria? So for viewers at home who are thinking, okay, I've potentially seen, a small block of flats that's in the inner city that I might be interested in. When they approach TUHF, what are some of the things that TUHF is looking out for?
Okay, so the first thing TUHF is looking for is for fit. For that particular entrepreneur or enterprise. TUHF has what we call a character-based lending strategy, which means we look at the character as well as the kind of the background and the tools and abilities of the person that's behind the deal. The second thing we look at is the commercial viability of the deal. So does that make commercial sense, i.e., can the loan that we give you be paid back by the income generated from this particular property that you are looking at?
And then perhaps, Mahlatse, let's look at then one sort of the steps that an entrepreneur would be walking as they approach TUHF. So I see a block of flats, let's say in the Joburg CBD, and I'm interested in, certainly raising finance for it. Let's assume it's 10 million rands, and I come and approach TUHF. What are some of the things that you'd be asking of me? And because as we're saying that you use a character-based lending strategy, perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about that, because I'm sure viewers at home are also thinking, okay, we know certainly a lot of banks look at your credit score, they look at your financials, bank statements. It's certainly the first time on the show that our viewers hear that concept. So perhaps explain it a little bit to us.
So character-based lending is basically looking at one's character and what their competencies are, i.e., what is their background and the particular deal that they're looking at. Does that fit with the particular background that they come from? We wouldn't want to necessarily give a start-out client one of the biggest deals. And also we wouldn't want to give somebody who's well-established a loan that's kind of for a start-out type client. That's kind of the basis for character-based lending. When somebody approaches TUHF, it's generally they have a property that they have seen, they're interested in getting finance for it, we would go through a feasibility with them and assess the viability of the project in terms of the potential rental income, the construction costs associated with it, the purchase price, and also how much equity that particular individual has.
Mm, mm. And so Mahlatse, I mean, certainly one of the big things that as a property entrepreneur, or certainly people who are looking to go into property entrepreneurship, is they want to probably find out what are the most successful property entrepreneurs doing right. So when you look at some of the entrepreneurs that have walked through your doors and some of the deals certainly that you have financed, perhaps take us through then some of the things that they're doing right. Because this is, of course, where we want to look at those tips to help people who are exploring commercial real estate and buying sort of more than one property, or rather more than one unit, like an apartment. You're essentially looking to buy the whole block. And after the break, when we go to a break, I actually want to even look at one of TUHF's other products, but I'll tell you a little bit about that later on. So what are some of the ingredients, would you say, Mahlatse, stand out in terms of some of the more successful entrepreneurs that TUHF has backed, that our viewers at home can take and learn from them?
So I'd say the first starting point is to buy correctly. So buy at the correct price. Buy a kind of building that suits what your risk appetite is and what your capabilities are. That's kind of the starting point. We find that most entrepreneurs who are successful are very kind of street level. They are well networked. They have a network of real estate agents. They have a network of developers and financiers. A lot of platforms such as private property, they provide a basis for clients to start looking at properties. But it's only really when you start engaging with your peers and fellow entrepreneurs that you start finding what a good transaction looks like.
And I think that's such an important thing that you mentioned. I mean, we certainly know that your network is such a rich place to tap into in any business, not only in the property space. So when you buy correctly, so it's properly priced, you've probably done, your research, what are other, things that you essentially need to consider as you're exploring different deals? Because I think certainly when you want to go from buying apartments, it's easier for you to do a comparison from one apartment to the next, because they'll be similar in price and they're in the same area. And even when you want to, for example, set your rental price point with just one apartment, it's easier to do a comparison. It's obviously a very different ball game the moment you're looking at buying a whole block of flats. So beyond sort of buying correctly in terms of making the right decision, what are some of the other factors that entrepreneurs need to be mindful of so that they're able to get the best deal and make sure that they even bring the best deal to TUHF when they're looking for the financing?
I should probably mention first that it's quite difficult to find a very good deal in the inner city. So many people will come with a few deals before eventually becoming successful. So a few things to look at is just do your market research, i.e. what can a unit achieve in that particular market? What are the vacancy rates in the market? What is the purchase price per unit in the market? Those are very good things to have on hand. I think it's also good to mention that we, like you mentioned in the beginning, we are able to walk you through the journey. So somebody who doesn't come with the complete package at the beginning, we are able to assist you, and where you have shortcomings, we'll try to put in a measure in place to try assist you. For example, if you're not a very big property owner or landlord, we have a whole database of property managers, building managers, etc., which we can recommend and take you through kind of the management of the building as a company.
Mahlatse, we're going to go for a quick break, and when we come back from our break, we're going to take questions and comments from viewers at home. But I also actually want us to explore one of the products that TUHF launched. I think it was last year, MASTANDI, where the financing is for back rooms in the township. I know certainly those of us who live in the townships, we know that people build back rooms and rent them out. And over the past few years, that's been a growing market where people are now building more luxurious back rooms or bachelor apartments, as we now call them, in the townships, and how sort of TUHF is essentially funding that and what they're looking for when they're looking to fund that one, but also look at some of the mistakes to avoid. I mean, we've certainly been focusing quite a bit on what to do to get things right, but what are some of the mistakes as a property entrepreneur you should be avoiding, whether you're looking to invest in the inner city or looking to invest in the township economy? We're going to go for a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be taking your questions and comments with Mahlatse Kekana. Welcome back to episode 61 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zama Khumalo. This evening, we're looking at what to do when you're the boss. Tips for commercial real estate entrepreneurial success. So we're talking to all the property entrepreneurs or even aspiring property entrepreneurs who are certainly looking at not just buying one apartment, but we're looking at people who are looking to buy the blocks of flats and really, shake things up certainly in the property portfolio. And to help us better understand what we should be doing and avoiding when we're looking at commercial real estate, I'm joined this evening by Mahlatse Kekana, who's a junior portfolio manager at TUHF. Now, Mahlatse, I did say that before the break, one of the things that I certainly want us to look at is, let's look at the mistakes to avoid. I mean, we certainly looked at what we should be getting right, even as we are searching. You mentioned before the break that buying correctly is quite important, whether it's getting the right price point, doing our market research with that particular building, making sure that we understand the numbers that go behind a particular building. What should we be avoiding, especially for new timers? Because I certainly get a sense that, as more and more people are waking up to property being a potential avenue for them, we're trying to learn as much as we can about how to grow a portfolio or even venture into property. What should we be avoiding when we're looking at wanting to be successful in running our property businesses?
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, it's very difficult to find a viable deal. It takes a few tries before possibly landing one. So I'd say not to get attached to a particular deal because not a lot of factors go into any particular deal. As I mentioned, the character-based lending, the viability of the actual property, and the market in which the property finds itself. Secondly, I think a lot of entrepreneurs who are very successful are very close to their businesses. Many people will punt this as kind of a passive income business that you'd want to go into, which I probably wouldn't agree with. It needs you to be kind of hands-on and treat this as if it's a business on its own. I think those are the two that I'd say for now.
And before I actually go to questions from viewers at home, I see you, Lavendra, as well as Simphiwe, with your questions. We'll be addressing them shortly. Let's touch a little bit on MASTANDI. I know it launched last year, and certainly quite a number of people were excited about it. Tell us a bit about what MASTANDI essentially is.
MASTANDI is actually coming up on its third year now.
Okay.
And the first projects broke ground in 2018.
Okay.
Initially, as you alluded to, it was designed as a kind of a backroom strategy for township property owners. As time went, we saw that was a market, as well as people who just want to develop, entire blocks of flats, which is quite a growing market in the townships. MASTANDI is one of our group companies in the group. The pilot was launched in 2017 and is just being phased out now currently. So it's a fully fledged product. There are many running projects within Soweto and Spruitview. And it's really becoming gaining a lot of traction and seeing a lot of interest.
Yeah. So, of course, taking your questions and comments at home. If you're certainly a property entrepreneur or an aspiring property entrepreneur and looking at different ways to raise finance to, fund your property deals, do send through those questions. First question coming in from Simphiwe Sangweni, who says, can TUHF let us know exactly how their areas work? I once applied for a property in the CBD and I was told that the street is not within their area.
I think you'd have to specify what street that is, but we are largely based in inner city and near nodes. So if you look on our website, you'll see all the areas that we are based in. I'm not sure which area Simphiwe is based in, but you can find all that information on our website. I suppose maybe what Simphiwe dealt with is, for example, he wasn't maybe in the CBD of the particular area. For example, if you're in Germiston, not all parts of Germiston are considered inner city or CBD areas. There's the more suburban and affluent types of areas.
Another question coming in here from our YouTube viewer, Carol Mbele, who asks, would TUHF consider an application if it were previously rejected by the bank? Do they consider individuals' credit profiles?
Okay, so Carol, yes, we do consider individual credit profiles. So we do FICA as with any other financial institution. Whether or not the deal has been rejected by a bank, they have a different lending criteria to what we have, so we could definitely consider that.
Okay. And another one coming in here from Lavendra Pillay, who asks, are there any area restrictions as some banks have declined some areas?
So Lavendra, we are in a city, and so we don't operate outside of inner city and near nodes. So yeah. And
then perhaps Mahlatse, let's look at the MASTANDI, because as you were saying, you certainly operate in the inner city. MASTANDI would be looking at certain townships. Are you open to townships sort of across the country? Are you only focusing right now in certain townships within, for example, the Gauteng area?
So MASTANDI has two footprints. One is here in Johannesburg and the other is in Cape Town. So Cape Town also it's also seen some success in gaining traction. It's a small company but growing, and so as the pilot is being phased out, we'll be more than open to expand the areas.
We're taking another one from another comment, this time saying from Level Up Dawn on YouTube, saying this is a great topic. Personally, I've shielded away from commercial real estate, but learning about TUHF's existence is making me reconsider. And I think it's certainly one of those things, Mahlatse, where people typically think that when you want to access home loan financing, we go typically to the big banks because that's where we think we should be going for financing. And as you venture into certainly being a property entrepreneur who wants to buy beyond one unit at a time and looking at blocks of flats, you start having a very different conversation, not only with banks, but certainly wanting to explore different financial institutions. Perhaps before we round up our conversation, what are some of the, I'll say, key things you want, particularly people who are about to start off? Because I think those who've been at it know how to, structure deals. Earlier you were mentioning how it just takes so long to get a viable deal. And I think it's certainly something that people probably take for granted. What are some of the things we can do to almost fast track getting that viable deal? Because you can do the research, you can go into private property, look at the different blocks, but what exactly can we do better for us to put together the most viable deal even before we, approach a TUHF or any other financial institution?
Okay. Firstly, I think a lot of people would share the same sentiments as Dawn. When you think about commercial property finance, it seems like something that's quite distant. And I think companies like ourselves make it quite accessible to, somebody, a common person on the street. With regards to what to look for somebody who's new to property finance, I think it's important to interrogate kind of the facts. So interrogate what reasonable property prices go for in the market, rentals in the market, what kind of vacancies and bad debts clients experience, what are your operating costs in terms of council billing and maintenance, etc. Don't take something that's advertised at face value and think that's kind of the price. For us on the financing side, we try to get the best possible price for any particular property. So it's important for entrepreneurs to do the same and kind of, I don't want to say push it, but push prices as far as they can. It just adds to the viability.
I certainly remember I've sort of walked the journey slightly with TUHF and interacted with TUHF on a few occasions. One of the things I picked up was you're quite prudent in the rental projections, because oftentimes as entrepreneurs, you almost want to operate at full vacancy, thinking that you'll always get full vacancy, whereas the estimation, certainly from the financing side, on your side, is slightly more prudent when running the feasibility of the deal. And I think, if anything, going through that process, I certainly learned that whatever you think you're going to make, almost reduce it significantly and see that, let's say you're reducing it by 20%, whatever running costs add, because you probably haven't done the best estimate, especially when it comes to things like maintenance, or certainly when you have to, refurb the particular block, add a margin on it that you higher than what you currently have, and then see if the numbers still stack up after that. You tend to find we take a very optimistic view, wouldn't you say, Mahlatse, as entrepreneurs when we are presenting a deal?
So what we encourage is just being, conservative and realistic. We'd rather look at kind of the worst case scenario than the best case scenario, and factor in for that. I think that's what you're referring to. So, for example, we currently use a vacancy rate of 5%. So, if entrepreneurs would generally project things on maybe 100% full vacancies, we'd like to take more of a conservative view, add in bad debts, add in fluctuating operating costs, conservative rental increases over years, etc.
We've got another question also from YouTube, this one coming in from Bella Dladla, who asks, hi, can UMASTANDI finance other townships like Lombardi East? I have a vacant stand, interested in building a block of flats. Would UMASTANDI finance that?
It would be difficult for me to answer that, given that we've just come out of this pilot phase. But he's more than happy to engage with us. I think we've had quite a number of inquiries in the area, and we'd be happy to walk him through it.
Okay. We've got another one from one of our regulars, Howard Mwegetsane, who asks, would TUHF consider a multiple well-researched properties in multiple blocks and not necessarily the entire one block, but units in multiple blocks? Would they consider structuring a deal to cater for that and have one repayment model with an inclusive interest rate, say 10 units in multiple blocks around the same CBD area? I like this question. You can see how it is a deal maker.
So Howard, what we require if you're purchasing in a sectional title scheme, that you at least own 50% of the units in the scheme. Secondly, we look at deals on a property by property basis. So we would be able to consider multiple deals, but they would be all seen on their own. They would have to stand individually on their own.
So essentially, on Howard's example, if he's looking to buy, let's say, 10 units in one block of flats, he would essentially need to own 50% of that particular block. Then you consider financing the 10 units in that block, and the next block would be a separate deal altogether. You wouldn't essentially clump them up and make it one deal.
Yeah, so I think what Howard's alluding to is kind of a borrower type lending. We look at deals on a per building basis.
Okay. And another one here from Roseanne Moodley, who says, how would you know what is best to buy, when it's the best time to buy a price of property? Sometimes it might look, so essentially how would we know when it's the best time to buy and at a particular price? Because sometimes, certainly a building might look a certain way and you might not get the best sense if that price point is the right price point for a building. I think it's certainly easier when you do desktop research for an apartment, but it's a completely different beast once you do blocks of flats. I mean, the due diligence on that is quite stressful. So what's the best way, certainly for the newcomer entrepreneurs to do their due diligence themselves as they're putting that deal together?
I think to answer that question, it's difficult to know when is the perfect time. You always know when the perfect time is in hindsight. So you have to look at the surrounding factors. So what are the rentals in the market currently? What are the interest rates? So we know that interest rates have been cut significantly. We are heading towards a buyer's market, and so prices should be more negotiable. So those are the kinds of factors you have to take into account. It would be difficult for anybody to say that a month from now is perfect versus a month back from today.
We've got another question here, which is coming from Lafina Tswaeli, who asks, can TUHF consider a person who wants to build a block of flats, ekasi?
Yes, certainly. I was mentioning before that MASTANDI, initially it was envisioned as a backroom type product. But as time went, we saw that there's an appetite for people who want to do that, and in addition, want to build blocks of flats in townships. So certainly we would.
And I'm actually going to, follow that up. But I'd say, what kind of certainly projections would you be looking for in an area like that? Because we certainly know that certain townships, the growth in them in terms of property is quite significant. Perhaps newcomers might not be able to best access some of that data. But as a financier, what are you looking for when somebody has identified a piece of land and they essentially are they bringing a business plan? What does that business plan have? Because that is a completely different ball game to, certainly like the inner city where you're able to do a better comparison. You're not building a building from scratch. for the most part, you're probably doing a refurb. I know, for example, one of the big tips that TUHF certainly gave me when I went in and assessing different blocks of flats was we also want to try out one that doesn't need a lot of refurbishment, especially as a first-time deal, because refurbishing is a completely different beast on its own, especially when you're looking at trying to refurb an apartment block that costs, let's say, 3 million to refurb. So even managing a 3 million rand budget can be quite strenuous. So when you're looking at financing an entrepreneur who's identified a piece of land and perhaps having a conversation with the seller, what are some of the things that, as a financier, you're essentially looking for before you even finance that deal?
Okay, so to first-time or beginner type entrepreneurs in the space, I would always suggest to them that they look at refurbishments before they consider things like a new build or a conversion, simply because there's less complexity in that. Building costs are somewhat more manageable, and it requires kind of a less skillful or experienced entrepreneur. That's the first part of the question. And then the second part of it, construction costs are more or less fixed. So regardless of where you're building, you pay, more or less the same. So if you're looking at a property, let's say in the townships, the major thing will be the price that you're paying for the land that you plan on developing.
And before we wrap up, Mahlatse, any final tips you certainly have for viewers at home, whether they are slightly more seasoned when it comes to their entrepreneurial journey, or they're certainly looking to start off their property entrepreneurial journey? Any final tips you have for them in order for them to, best succeed in their entrepreneurial ventures?
I'd say establish networks, firstly. Interrogate purchase prices. And thirdly, be conservative in your estimates.
Thank you so much there, Mahlatse. That is Mahlatse Kekana, who's a junior portfolio manager at TUHF. If you want their contact details, we have shared them down here below, whether you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, and you can contact them directly should you want to have a conversation. And certainly, one of the things that I quite like about TUHF is that they're very open to even having a conversation with you before you found that particular deal. And once you have, they're also walking that journey with you. So really is one of those things that you certainly want in the early stages of your entrepreneurial journey. So thank you very much to Mahlatse Kekana. And of course, that does bring us to the end of this evening's show, which has been quite insightful. I mean, I know a lot of us are looking to venture into property, certainly as an entrepreneur, and perhaps even doing it full time. You're seeing different opportunities in the area that you live in, and you want to take advantage of them and fill that gap as much as possible. So do, of course, go to privateproperty.co.za under the advice section and read up certainly as much as you can, so that when we come on air, you're able to ask the best questions certainly to our guests. That's it, of course, for this evening's show. Remember, you can participate in our competition where we'll be announcing the winner next week, Friday. And all you have to do is tell us why you love your town or your city. Share with us what town or city you're living in, what you love about it so much, or if there's a particular feature that you love about it. You're even welcome to share, pictures of that particular feature, and you can enter that competition in the link that we've provided below, and you stand a chance of winning one of 2 1,000 Rand prizes that we'll be giving away right here live on air. Well, folks, that's it from me, Zama Khumalo, on the Private Property Podcast. We'll be back again tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. And as always, stay home and stay safe.
Besides the beautiful beaches, sunny skies and how central everything is, what I really love about Umhlanga is the people. You can't help but become immersed in the culture, and you'll find people connecting in the most authentic spaces. It's just got this vibe to it. It's hard to think that only a few years ago, these business parks and homes were mostly sugarcane. The rate that this area has been developed at is truly mind-blowing. Especially with the fast pace of life these days, we really pride ourselves in being that bright spot in a person's day. You'll see everything from advocates and CEOs to creatives and students who pop into our spot for that short moment to escape. There's just so much life and energy in this area, and after a hectic week, there's nothing better than stopping in at Mount Edgecombe Country Club for a relaxed round of golf. The beauty and serenity that the estate offers really inspires me. There's honestly no place I'd rather live. That's my Umhlanga.
Tips for dealing with the bank. So perhaps you're renting in a property where it is run by a body corporate.
Understanding the basic calculation, income minus expenses, and you want to be left with a positive income.
It is a very tough game. It's not easy at all.
To stay ahead of knowing exactly what your clients need, what their teething issues are.
Have a joint move-in inspection.
That a lot of people that are coming into sectional title homeowners associations are just like you described, not only first-time homeowners, but first-time owners and residents in community schemes.
They get to see the perspective from the other side of the aisle. And I think that's a really important thing to do.
It's a market that's estimated to be transacting at least 9 billion rand per year. So it's a huge market.
In order to get there,
you need to be able to build up a track record.
Your cash flow model needs to be sharp.
A quote comes to mind. The best time to buy a property was about 10 years ago. The next best time is now.